I'm Maynard Eaton, Executive Editor of Southeast Region News, here with Politics 411 again, with poet, playwright, and acclaimed author Pearl Cleage. Pearl, welcome. You've done many things, writing, poetry, books, acclaimed author, now a playwright again, this time about politics though, as I take it.
Right. This play opens actually on the night that Maynard Jackson was elected Atlanta's first African-American mayor, October 16th, 1973. And it really features a cast of imaginary characters, but in the play, they've all been very much involved in this campaign. So they're really looking at that moment of real transition and change.
But this was a highlight in black political life, the election of the first black mayor of a major city in the South. So it was more than just frivolity. This was serious.
Oh, this was very serious, and the people in this play talk about that a lot, about the flow of history and the tide of history and your responsibility at this moment in history. And all of us, I worked in that campaign, and all of us were very aware that we were doing something that was more important than probably anything we had ever done before. And many of us were very young, 24, 25 years old, so that this was a chance for us to really step up into something that was going to require everything that we had to give. But it was so exciting because we knew we were ready.
Is this a retrospective look back at what it meant now and then, or something that you said it's a little funny?
Right. It's actually a romantic comedy because part of what I think is so interesting now, when we look back at history, and I've been alive long enough now to when I look back, people think of it as history, and I say, no, it's just my 20s. It's not history to me. But I think that part of what happens is that we sanitize everything and we clean up everything. So when we tell it, we're all heroes. We all marched. We all risked our lives. And you know and I know that's really not true. We were, even as we were doing these wonderful historic things, we were messy. We were human beings. We had problems. We had marriages. We had babies. We had affairs. We had all of that stuff that human beings have, and we still changed the world. So that these people, because it's a romantic comedy, are trying to not only do the political work that needs to be done, but figure out how to handle their rather messy and complicated love lives.
Why a play about this era, as opposed to the plethora of books you've done that talk about politics as well?
Well, I actually am trained as a playwright, and I love theater more than any other kind of writing.
So you started, right?
Absolutely, writing plays. I went to Howard and graduated from Spelman in drama. But the thing about writing is you have to do the actual writing by yourself. But with a novel, you write it by yourself, people read it by themselves, and it's a very solitary kind of exchange. With a play, you write it by yourself, but then you go into rehearsal. You've got actors and designers and directors, and it's a whole collaborative group of people who are doing something together. And then once you open, you invite the audience, which is the final part of that collaboration. So it's very exciting because you're seeing whether or not the work moves people, whether or not it works right there while they're seeing it. Now, I always sit in the back, so if it's not working well, I can sneak out. Nobody knows I was there. But if it works well, there's no other feeling like it because it's people sharing that work together. You know, you see people who came into the theater who didn't even know each other, but they're seated next to each other. If they like the play, they'll start talking, not only about the play, but about who you are, who I am, what we think about the issues that the play had to raise. And it's really, I think, a wonderful way for people to build community and to communicate with each other.
What issues do you hope are raised during this? What do you hope people say about this particular play? And the name again is?
The name of the play is What I Learned in Paris, although it's set in Atlanta. Because I've never been to Paris. But the main character went to Paris and learned a big lesson about her own life and about what she wanted in her life. So it's really her story that she tells about Paris.
And it's not your story?
Not my story. Never been to Paris, not my story. But I do confess that this period meant a lot to me, and that the people that are represented in these fictional characters, what I'm trying to do there is reflect some of the things that I know to be true from my own experience. But it's not an autobiographical play. That's what somebody said to me. People are going to spend their whole time saying, is that this one and is that one? But that's okay. That's all right with me. What I hope that people get from this play, because it's got politics in it, racial politics, gender politics, but it's really at heart about the necessity to tell the truth. If you're going to be in politics, if you're going to be in love, when you start lying is when you mess all that up. And I think that it's really relevant at this moment in our national political life because there's a lot of lying going on. And people are now acting like, well, that's just an accepted part of the process. Everybody lies. Everybody doesn't lie. And we can't ever get to the place where we accept lying as something that we're just going to do. We have to be committed to telling the truth and to be expecting the truth from the people who are in our lives on a personal level, and also those people who present themselves for public office. So I hope that people will have a good time, will laugh at some of the things these people do, that will remind us of some of the things that we do, but will also come away with an opportunity to think about what it means to devote yourself to actually telling the truth.
Having been there at the starting point, starting gun, if you will, of this political race of mayors that have seen since Maynard Jackson, what's your thinking now about? You've been here, Atlanta. This is your home. You write about it all the time. Politics still resonate with you? Still matters?
It does. I think politics really matters, and I think it matters so much locally. You know, we tend to focus on politics, many of us, once every 4 years. We think about the president, but then we don't think about the midterm elections, which are equally important, the local elections, which are equally important. So politics, I think, is where all of us come in contact with what it means to be in a community. You know, we can't do everything by ourselves. You can keep your own little house perfect. You can paint it, you can cut your grass, you can do all of that. If the city isn't going to pick up the trash on your street, then it doesn't make any difference what you do. If your streets are not, you can't drive on them because there's potholes in the street. You can't do that by yourself. You have to have a city government that responds to what you need and to keeping the city in a certain kind of way. So it's still, politics is still very, very important to me. I'm not as involved in it as I used to be because it's difficult to dabble in politics for me, and I really don't have the time and energy to commit full-time to politics and also commit full-time to the writing I think I need to do.
Any disappointment? Do you lament anything you see and hear now as opposed to that glorious time when you first started? Has it changed to the point that distresses you?
I think people are a lot more cynical now. When Maynard got elected for the first time, people were very optimistic about what was going to happen in this city. They were optimistic to the point of being naive, really, about what one person could do. And I think we've seen the same thing with President Obama. People were so excited about him, but they really took that excitement to an unreal place to act like this one man could do this all by himself, no matter what the Congress did, no matter what the Senate did. So I think that there's a cynicism that people have that they didn't have when Maynard first got elected all those years ago. And I think that's very important, that we have to be careful that we don't become so cynical about the process, that we don't support the good people who are prepared to do the hard work we need to do.
Well, see, a political spirit, a political being, force, that we would never see again?
Well, I think he was totally a political animal. I think he loved politics, and he loved the campaigning. He loved talking to people. He used to make me laugh because he would walk down the street in Atlanta all the time, just stop and get out the car and walk down the street where there were people and walk up to them and say, "I'm Maynard Jackson." Now, he couldn't have been anybody but Maynard Jackson. Nobody in Atlanta didn't know who he was. And they would laugh and say, "Oh, I know who you are," and introduce themselves, and he would start talking. And he loved all of that, all of the meeting people and talking to them about what they needed. But he also was very good at all the nuts and bolts, making sure that that airport had minority involvement, making sure that women were involved at levels they hadn't been before. So he was a brilliant politician and also a person who knew what it took to run a major American city. And we do still have mayors like that. I think our mayor that we have now is really doing a good job in very trying times. I think a mayor like Cory Booker is really a great big city mayor. So I think we do have mayors and people who put themselves forward to be mayors, but it's a very difficult job to run an American city, to run for president, to run for the Senate. I don't understand how anybody ever wakes up in the morning and says, "You know what, I think I'd like to be mayor of Atlanta." It's like, oh man, it's such a challenge, but they do it, and I think we owe it to them to try to work with them when they take it on.
But you're smart enough to know the timing of this play is certainly apropos with the timing of the upcoming presidential election.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Was it deliberately done that way?
Well, I wasn't writing it thinking that it would open the season, but once I wrote it and talked to Susan Booth, who is the artistic director here at the Alliance and is directing the show, she was very enthusiastic about doing it at this time because people are going to be talking about politics. But this is a way to look at politics but not have to have all of the tension and stress that we have now because it's 1973. It's not our lives at this moment. And it's a comedy, so it gives you a chance to take a breath, to laugh. And since it's a romantic comedy, you know, one of the rules of that kind of play is it's got to have a happy ending. Everything is going to work out. And we don't know what's going to happen in November. We hope everything works out the way we want it to. But I think that one of the things that this play does is remind us that part of what politics presents is a chance to be better, a chance to do better, a chance to tell the truth and to use that truth to build the kind of community that you want to live in and raise your children in and grow old in. So I hope that the play gives people a chance to take a breath and then go out and rededicate themselves to the struggle we're in today.
Well, having the kind of community we want to live in and grow up in and raise our children is always kind of been the underpinning of many of your books. You talk about the West End like it's the greatest community since
That's my fantasy, West End. I keep saying, I hope that if I say it often enough, we'll remember and realize we can make it that way. But when people say, oh, I've read your books and I'm moving to Atlanta and I really want to live in West End, I say, fiction, this is a novel. We do not yet have a West End where you can walk around as a woman at 4 a.m. and not look over your shoulder. We don't have that. But we could have that if we wanted that, if we were prepared to work for that and figure out how to do that. So that it's part of my mission in writing these books is to say, wouldn't it be great if we could walk down the street and not be afraid? Wouldn't it be great if we knew our neighbors by name? Wouldn't it be great if?
But in many respects, the Maynard Jacksons and the Andrew Youngs and Shirley Franklins have put Atlanta on the map. But so too is Pearl Cleage.
Oh, I'm very flattered to hear that because I love Atlanta. I really do. It never occurred to me growing up in Detroit that I would ever come south of the Mason-Dixon line. My parents were in the north. I was raised in Detroit, but my grandparents are all southern. But they left the South when it was a very different place and never went back. I don't mean went back every now and then. They never went back south. So that I grew up with people in my family saying, don't ever go to Alabama, which is where part of my family is from. Don't go to Montgomery, don't go to Alabama. So that when I came to Georgia, my grandfather was like really frightened for us because he thought that my sister and I were making a really bad choice to come south. And I kept saying, it's different now, it's not the same.
But your dad brought the Shrine of the Black Madonna here, didn't
That was after I got here.
That
was after I got here. Yeah, in fact, a lot of my family live here now. My sister and all her children and her husband, they all live here, but nobody. I was like kind of the pioneer. I was in the vanguard. I said, look, I can't say the whole South is different, but Atlanta's a different place. And I think that I told my dad I thought it would be a great place for him to open a shrine, that he would find a very receptive community around here. So he did.
Your career has been, again, based here, but it's also on the plethora of artistry, if you will. Playwright, again, author, and poet. What do you call yourself?
I just call myself a writer. I don't try to say I'm a poet, I'm a playwright. I'm a writer. I put words on paper. And sometimes it's a play, sometimes it's a novel. But I love writing. I love the process. I know I have a lot of friends who are writers who love once the book is done, but they hate the process. They hate to have to get up, go somewhere, sit down, close the door, and actually do it. They like to talk about the book. Sit in the kitchen, drink wine, talk about the book. Go to the restaurant, drink wine, talk about the book. But after a while, you have to actually write the book. But I really enjoy the process, and whenever I finish a big project, I always say, okay, I'm going to take some time. I'm not going to write anything. I'm going to take 6 months and do something else. And that lasts about 2 weeks. I can't do it. The way I process information and move through the world has everything to do with putting words on paper. So I really love doing it, and I think I'm very fortunate in that I can work in a number of different mediums. So that if I have an idea that's not a book, it could be a play. If I have an idea that's an essay, it can be that. And I'm comfortable working in a lot of different mediums so that I never have that moment of, oh my goodness, it's not a play, what am I going to do? It's like, okay, it'll be something.
So did politics turn you off so much as a press secretary for Maynard Jackson? You said, let me get out of this and really become a real writer?
Well, not so much, because I was writing when I went to work there, but I started off, I volunteered for him as a speechwriter.
Okay.
And then when I got to City Hall, I was working with all the press people, but I still was writing speeches, press releases. I was writing in his voice all the time. And I had a little baby at that time, so that I had a life that didn't allow me to start writing until like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. And I remember having gotten everything done for the next day at work, put my child to bed, everybody was quiet in the house, and trying to write a love poem. And the only voice that was in my head was Maynard Jackson's voice. Now, I loved and respected Maynard, but he was not supposed to be writing my love poem, so I had to say, okay, I got to choose. Either I'm going to really put my energy here and do this for the duration, or I'm going to step back from that and really try to see if I can find my own voice as a writer and work in that voice. And that was ultimately the best choice for me.
You've been honored by Oprah Winfrey And that to me, for many writers, is kind of the pinnacle, or one of the pinnacles of your profession. Where to now for Pearl Cleage? What now?
I just want to keep working. It was wonderful to have Oprah pick my novel. It was wonderful to write the poem for her Legends Weekend. But I am a writer, so that I never think in terms of, okay, now I've done everything I wanted to do, now I can, what? What would I do? It's like asking Tiger Woods, when you retire, what will you do? He'll play golf. You know, I can't imagine doing anything other than writing. So I have a couple of plays already in mind. Once this one gets up on its feet, I'll take those 2 weeks that I'm going to pretend are 6 months and be done. But I think I'm very fortunate in that I've been able to figure out how to make a living doing the thing I love most in the world. So I hope that I can continue to write well enough to find an audience so that I can just keep doing it. I mean, I see myself as a little old lady walking around Southwest Atlanta still taking notes, still taking
But you mentioned Atlanta. Atlanta is where you're going to be. This is your home. Some aspire to go to New York and other places. Atlanta is where you make it, you put down your roots and do all your writing.
And people have told me, you know, they don't do it much anymore because I was right, they were wrong, which was, you're never going to be able to do good work living here. This is, you know, you'll end up being a very big fish in a very small pond, and you won't have the competition you need, and you want this and you want that. And those are all New York people. You got to go to New York, you got to go to New York. And I don't think that's true. I don't think New York would have been the place for me as a writer. I love New York. It's very exciting. I love to go. I love to see my friends who are up there working on Broadway now. I love all of that. But New York is a different pace. There's a different kind of energy there. And the energy that I need is not necessarily one where you got to be revved up all the time. I need to be able to get up in the morning, go into my office in my house, and there's my magnolia tree, there's my neighbors acting a fool outside, so that I can really ground myself somewhere that is a rhythm that encourages me to write. I don't know if I could ever get that in New York. There's too much other stuff to do. I don't know how anybody ever sits down to write anything in New York, because I want to be out when I'm in New York. I want to see what's going on. In Atlanta, I can sit down, ground myself, and do the work I need to do.
Well, many of us don't know how you do what you do. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much. You too.
Ladies and gentlemen, Politics 411 with a different twist with Pearl Cleage. I'm Maynard Eaton, Southeast Region News.
Thank you.